Hello and welcome to another episode of Macstaff Live. Glad you could join us this morning. Our TV news is full of features of public sector workers striking and seeking some of the most sizeable pay rises seen in decades. Private sector workers are starting to look at their own pay packets too. So as high inflation and the cost of living bites hard, is it a good time to go into your boss and ask for a wallet-busting or purse-busting pay rise and risk rocking the boat? Or should you sit tight, ride out the high inflation and earn some brownie points and getting on with things during tough times? We're joined today by Macstaff MD Anthony McCormack, who has some valuable tips and advice from his 20 years in the recruitment business. And I'm hoping he can shed some light on the questions I've just posed. Hello, Ant.
Hi, Martin. Good to see you again. How you doing?
Good, thank you. You?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. This is a tough one, though, Martin. I can't believe you've pulled the pin on the hand grenade and you're about to give it to me with these questions, because there's definitely no easy answers, isn't there? And the squeeze is on for businesses and individuals as well. And you know, it's topical, that's for sure. But there's a lot of fear and anger, and it's politically laced, isn't it? So good luck as we cover this, I suppose.
Over to you to provide some answers to some very difficult questions.
Yeah, the answers that people just hadn't thought of so far. No, I mean, I obviously do bring something to the table in terms of the recruitment experience, and it's standard. Is my salary on the money? Our blog's been, hasn't it? And making sure that you're paid what you're worth and so on. But looking retrospectively, that's a little bit kind of just for the sake of, isn't it? Or even for ego of making sure that I'm being paid properly. This is different with the cost of living crisis and everything like that, and that goes for companies and individuals, really. It's a heating or eating thing, isn't it? That's the soundbite, and it can even be a life and death thing from a mental health perspective. So I'm kind of grateful to be able to have a platform to cover some of these things. We'll try and be fair and open and transparent, and hopefully people walk away with a little bit more peace of mind or some tactics as to what to do, because it's all doom and gloom on the news, that's for sure, isn't it?
Yeah, great stuff. Before we get too into it, and let's start with some facts that I've just found this morning. A third of UK workers say the rising cost of living is compelling them to consider changing sectors to secure higher pay. 30% of UK workers feel their salary doesn't cover their basic living costs. 90% of workers have experienced rising work-related costs in the last year, and 80% of employers are now concerned about the rising cost of living. And those stats were from a report from a couple of months ago as well. So goodness knows what it'd be like now with inflation tipping over 10% recently. So
yeah, and we should reference Total Jobs for an excellent report as well. It was over 4,000 respondents, so it's a proper piece of research, and it just backs what I'm seeing in the market week to week.
So I mean, specifically talking about the private sector, do you have sympathy with private sector workers at the moment who are looking at the public sector battling for their own pay rises in line with or close to inflation, and they're sitting at home wondering whether I do the same thing or whether I should just hold fire? It's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, definitely, because the public sector kind of pay rises and pay negotiations and things like that is by definition taking place in the public domain, isn't it? It's it's a matter of public record sort of thing, and the government again is in a tough spot of trying to balance their books and to try and be fair, but be kind of prudent as well in terms of tax money. There's no, as more the Conservatives tend to say, I suppose, there's no public money. There's no spare money to give out. It's all our money anyway. It's just what comes in through taxes and goes out in terms of paying the public sector or providing public services and things like that. So yeah, definitely I have empathy. There's pay rises that maybe around the 5% mark, isn't there, in the public sector. I'm not typically a fan of trades unions, but people want one now, don't they? It's exactly what you need in the private sector if you're going to try and kind of leverage for pay rise to keep pace with cost of living. What I would say though is when people are negotiating pay rises, and it's really timely from the union's point of view, isn't it, that there's loads of leverage there now, loads of unsettlement, and there's good kind of rationale behind asking for a big pay rise. It is a long-term solution for what is hopefully a short-term problem here, though, because inflation is at 10% because of unprecedented, mostly external factors, like namely Putin's war in Ukraine, and hopefully in 6 months' time recession will subside, maybe, or inflation I should say, will subside maybe to a 5% type level, and those pay rises might be bang on the money then. But the unfortunate thing is as well, and especially when you're talking NHS and teachers and things like that, it's a massive cost base that you're literally pouring kind of fuel on the fire of inflation. By doing the pay rise, it literally accelerates the whole inflation situation. So it's a really tough one. Private sector workers, going to want equity on that, but it's a lot more case by case, isn't it? I suppose, as to what kind of company, what kind of job.
And that's where their difficulty is, and because they're watching this on television, they might have another half or a spouse who's in the public sector and who's just about to get a pay rise of, the likes of which we've not seen for a long while due to inflation. And they technically, traditionally, maybe not represented by a union in the private sector as much as maybe the public sector workers.
That's right, yeah.
So where do they get their support from? And, the other half might be saying, come on, you need to go and ask for a pay rise as well. Our costs are going up. It's time to do something about it. You need to get in there. And that's the position they're in. What's the answer?
Yeah, and looking at that kind of report as well that you referenced, 42% of workers have said they had pay rises within the last year. Meaning, of course, that 58%, if I've got my maths right, have not. Even the ones who have, it's out of date already, isn't it? And all of your data is out of date immediately because things are just spiraling, in a way out of control. My normal advice, and I guess it still stands, if people are going to, research and negotiate for a pay rise, they've got to bring some logic, some information to that. And I suggest that people look on annual salary surveys that might be published by big agencies like, say, Michael Page or Hayes. You can literally review jobs that are being advertised as of now on job boards like Total Jobs that we've mentioned, like CV Library, Reed. They'll give you an idea as to what other similar positions are paying, and you can use that as leverage. I suppose there's the should people be asking for a pay rise or not, and that's a personal decision, isn't it? And it depends on the company and whether they can afford it, and it depends, I suppose, whether you're doing the same job as lots of other people in the company and there should be an equity with that, or whether you're a standalone person who would have to debate and negotiate your value and your role on a case by case basis. But like I was saying, the information is out of date as soon as it's up there. If and pay rates are going up, they're just going up at a little bit of a slower rate now. People were asking for those 10% pay rises, and companies were coming up with it because it's a war for talent, and they would pay whatever it takes to get people through the door. Not the case now. Companies can't afford to. They're in a squeeze as well. There's been unprecedented rises in their costs from energy and raw materials, supply chain point of view, as well as wages. So they're saying enough's enough. We're going to have to dial back our plans. Really, we can't perhaps afford this expansion. And then there'll be a tipping point potentially as well, whereas salaries will stop going up because there's some redundancy in the market, and as soon as that happens, people are prepared to undercut and go in at a lower salary just to land the job, and just continues that downward spiral. I don't really know whether you remember, we talked economics, and whether we were going to go into recession or not a few months ago, didn't I? And I said this one's different. It's what the boffins call stagflation, that we haven't really seen since the 1930s, where you got the double whammy of negative economic growth and rising costs, i.e. inflation, happen together, a downward spiral potentially of in the economy, which can't self-rectify. It requires government support. What that's going to look like, we're waiting to find out, aren't we? There's a leadership election which is kind of putting all that on ice as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, you think you've got some tough answers, questions to answer. Wait till that gets sorted.
I guess so. Yeah, yeah. And there's like I said about the there's different answers, isn't there? According to political persuasion and things like that. But things have still got there's still a cost of living crisis. The costs have still gone up. It's just how we deal with that, and if there's support and how it's targeted. Like I quite like being able to target the poorest in society, the people who are genuinely struggling for the relief, rather than just making it standard across the board, because maybe me or you don't need that 400 quid right now, but there's certainly people who do, and you can attack it by there's been a lot of comparison with, say, Europe, hasn't there? And like, why haven't their energy prices gone up? And they can cap theirs because it's state controlled, say in France, but it's still being paid for by higher taxes. It's just that our current government are doing the kind of lower tax but higher energy bills method. Like it's still going to be just as tough, however you slice it. Really, it's going to be a tough 6 months. Like, to a certain extent, I think it's just time for people to tighten their belts and ride the storm out, rather than doing anything drastic.
Yeah, I suppose there's another, you just touched on it a few minutes ago there, quite interesting point for private sector workers as well, as if they are working for a smallish company, they will be heavily invested in the success of that company over the next 2, 5, 10 years themselves, because they want to keep a job, they want that to be successful, and going in and asking for a pay rise that is going to put added pressure on that business to get through a difficult stage and ride the rough times, again, will add weight to that decision about thinking, well, perhaps I shouldn't bother, and perhaps I should ride it out. Do you see that as a thing in your experience?
Definitely. So it's, should people ask for a pay rise? It's like no and yes, and it depends on the situation. Like I would, and I'd try and just emphasize and remind people that it's a relationship, like be it an employer relationship. It may be a personal one as well, or it may be kind of just work, especially in a larger company. But I think that employees maybe should, if they literally don't, if they're not against the wall financially, if they don't need that pay rise, don't jump on the bandwagon and try and kind of just leave it for one. The companies are having a rough ride staying afloat as it is, like without burdening extra, collectively burdening the company with extra costs by way of wage increases. And if you do have to, and you do, if you can't make ends meet, and it's difficult for you to cut back any more costs, or you can't gain extra money by other additional job, or additional hours and things like that, then sure, you're gonna have to ask for a pay rise, aren't you? You're there's no other way about it. But don't do it as a ultimatum, ideally, and don't cry wolf as I'm going to leave unless I get X, because it might be like, well, you better leave then, because we can't do anything about it. And then you've kind of shown your cards, haven't you? And there may be redundancies coming at companies that are struggling to pay rises. Like, it's part of the same problem, isn't it? And when redundancies do come, companies are going to bear in mind, who's been reasonable, who's been, open and communicative and things like that. But and it's going to seem a little trite again, but I think I've kind of finished off webinars like this before by saying, the best way to earn and secure a pay rise is to be more valuable. Keep that in mind when you're kind of levering as well. Don't just say, well, my bills have gone up, therefore, I need you to pay me more. It's like, how can I help more? Like, what extra projects can I do? Can I do extra hours? If I'm taking extra qualifications, can I help move the business forward? Can I, help you win projects? Can I, take on a sales capacity or something like that? And then you put yourself on the same side. It's a different negotiation then. But I think if you have to, then sure, you ask for that pay rise, and it's kind of going to be better if you can do that collectively with some kind of a representative. It may be there's a union situation, it may be just that you can liaise with HR, and maybe there's a like some kind of a leader in the company who can represent, a group of people doing roughly the same job. But again, be careful of your confidentiality as well, because, the water cooler talk where everybody kind of reveals about their salary and it turns out that people are on different ones and whatever, that can really upset the apple cart as well.
Yeah. Let's switch it over from candidate to client for a moment. And again, in your experience over the last few months, are businesses likely to say before anything kicks off in terms of wage rises, look, folks, this is the situation, we're battling to stay afloat, we don't want to make any redundancies. Unfortunately, this means we can only give X% pay rise at the end of the year. And that's where we're at. Is that a proactive approach to taking, grabbing the bull by the horns and doing something about it before the little, office whispers about, I'm going to go for a pay rise, and also am I? Is that a good thing? A good thing that they should do? Businesses should think of doing?
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely. Communication is the key of, kind of bringing people with you, so to speak, through any crisis, isn't it? So yeah, I'd encourage the companies to go on the front foot. Be proactive, be as transparent as possible. Especially if it's, kind of bad news potentially of, look, we're assessing costs and potential pay rises and things like that, and we can only do this, or we can't do anything, and here's why, and here's when we're going to review it again. And if it's true and transparent, then employees will understand. It may or may not make a difference. Like some people think they have to move companies or industries, to get enough to pay the bills anyway, don't they? But that would be a good retention strategy from the companies to be the first to that conversation, I suppose. And then it depends on the individual company and situation, doesn't it? There's been a lot of talk of the oil and gas and the energy companies profiteering, hasn't there? So that's not going to go down too well. Right. If they say, oh yeah, sorry, we can't afford to go to 5% for you, but we're kind of busy, not embezzling, but we're busy kind of like stockpiling all these kind of billions in profit. There's a caveat with that as well, though, because they're taking a load of flack, aren't they? But and maybe there should be a windfall tax and that sort of thing, and maybe there should. But keep in mind that they kind of already have had a windfall tax because they're being taxed on all the extra profit. That's how tax works. So their tax bills have certainly gone up a lot, and presumably they're reinvesting a lot of money in the kind of the future of the infrastructure as well, and the greening out of the energy industry. So it's not always kind of what you hear or kind of first expect. Okay,
let's just go back to that report we spoke about earlier about total jobs. One of the points in there was very interesting. I thought the people leaving or looking to leave work to get new jobs in different sectors to secure higher pay. Again, you're in the heart of all this stuff that's going on. Have you seen any of that yet? People just thinking, I've just got to leave this sector because I need another 10 grand or I need another 5 grand.
Yeah, definitely. And, fair play to people if they're bettering themselves and, chasing and achieving their dreams and things like that. And yeah, I've seen lots of changes of sector, and that's just, I guess, the feature of a dynamic market economy in general, like that, it's demand and supply, that, where there's high demand and low supply, wages go up. Where there's kind of low demand and high supply, wages potentially go down. So yeah, and throughout the pandemic, and as a knee jerk to crisis, and because needs must, I mean, think of the chef's example. They're all kind of locked out of their pubs, and may or may not be on furlough, but they've taken jobs in other industries, might be kind of warehouse or distribution, and some of them are never to return back, like because they've realized they're getting more money, more sociable hours, more benefits, like less hassle, less heat of the kitchen, and things are demographically and like just seismically shifting in the employment market, and that's the big dilemma in the public sector as well, isn't it? Because due pay rises have got to come in, like from a cost of living perspective, but also you need to retain like key worker key workers in those sectors as well. And if it's much banded about on the news, isn't it? If a shop worker can earn the same as a care worker and one job's easier than the other, but the care worker's earning less, why is that? Is that sustainable and things like that? Because doing it for love is only going to carry you so far. Like when your energy bill's 4 times as high as it was, it's a real tough one. So market forces will presumably in the end could do their Adam Smith thing, I think it is, the invisible hand, and work its magic whereby salaries will go up to a point, whereas then there's much more demand for people to come in there, and it's serviceable again. But there's a lot of pain in that adjustment phase.
Yeah. So I mean, we could talk forever about this, but as time's running out, how is this going to play out? There's talk of inflation peaking anything from October to January. It's time to get your crystal ball out and have a look into it. A company's going to have to put their wages up dramatically to try and keep people, attract new people, and is that leaving them into financial situations they don't want to get in? Where do you see it playing out over the next 6 months?
Yeah, well, I'm a glass half full guy, aren't I? So I'll try and end up that way, but I think it's going to be difficult. It already is, but people are kind of, and I can't blame them, putting their heads in the sand, because from an energy point of view, there's the October hike, then there's a January one as well, and then potentially more. So what I do see happening is that people are going to struggle. They're going to naturally struggle over the next 6 months. I think people are going to have to batten down the hatches, tighten their belts, make some changes, potentially think outside the box in terms of ways to earn extra money and things like that. I think companies are going to struggle with their cost base. There's going to be personal bankruptcies, I think, foreclosure on mortgages, poverty. It sounds a bit dystopian, doesn't it? I think there's going to be
but that's right, lots of small businesses going out of existence simply because they can't afford their heating bills.
Yeah, they'll just shut the doors. Yeah, so there's going to be companies going under, redundancies, that's going to potentially have a negative effect on the economy as well. I suppose the good news is that this is a short-term, primarily external crisis. That the underlying economy, I think, is still the labour market, and the economy in general is kind of good, strong, and underpinned nicely. So I think 6 months we can get the inflation under control. Everything else will just kind of fall back into place, I think. But people, I think, need to try not to be too reactionary on the candidate and the client side. Ride it out. Expect to have to make some adjustments, make some tough decisions. But hopefully the spring is a new dawn, so to speak. And we have to, as soon as we're through that winter period of needing less energy, then we might be on a stronger footing, and we can kind of start making long-term plans and and enjoying the pay rises that start to be meaningful again once the costs have kind of dialed back. But I empathize with people, and hang in there, keep your chins up, because we're in for a rocky ride the next 6 months. But that's hopefully it.
A very good place to end on. Thanks very much for your time, Ant, this morning. It would be nice to emphasise here that if people do have any questions about the issues we've spoken about today, please pop them in the comments box below, or get in touch with Anthony, and we'll endeavour to provide some more answers to your questions there. So that just leaves me, Martin Crowson, time to thank you once again for your time this morning. Anthony McCormack, MD of Macstaff. Thanks, Ant.
Cheers, Martin. It's a pleasure, and we'd be interested in any comments, obviously, from HR people to economists, just people wondering what to do as well, because we'll, I'm sure, work it out together.
You can find out more about Macstaff on the website, which is www.macstaff.co.uk. Please follow our YouTube channel. There's all sorts of videos and stuff on there to help you, from anything from providing a CV to working out whether you are on the right pay packet or not. So check us out there and subscribe. Follow Macstaff on all the socials across all the channels for further information. And we look forward to seeing you again soon here on Macstaff Live. Thanks for joining us.